Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Today we will be looking at a special kind of destroyer and a role that is pretty similar but still distinct enough that I feel like it's worth having an actual video about it. And that is the Scout Cruiser. So we've talked about stealth destroyer, torpedo boat destroyers. We've talked about the gunboat destroyers that can play aggressively and have the high maneuverability, have good firepower, but oftentimes have more short-range torpedoes and don't really do this whole stealth thing. But there's a type of destroyer, and it's not necessarily a distinct tech tree line, but oftentimes towards the end of some tech tree lines, that can be better classified as a destroyer leader or a scout cruiser. Probably the most prominent of these is the alternative German destroyer line leading up to the Elbing here. So what characterizes these kind of ships, and why are they different? If we have a very quick look at the Elbing, first of all, we see how large this ship is. This is a very big ship. She only gets 6 guns, but she actually has a cruiser caliber with 150 millimeter. And if you look at the maneuverability stats, you notice that in terms of turn time, in terms of acceleration, it's almost light cruiser level. And this is not the only ship. That's there, but this is one of those lines that is applicable. The Japanese gunboat line, starting at the Yakizuki, definitely with Kitakaze and the Harugumo, is in a similar boat. The Harugumo has 10 guns and has also almost light cruiser maneuverability. And in the Soviet line, the Khabarovsk as well sort of falls into this category. As you see, the ship's got lots of guns, pretty large, and also in maneuverability, sort of in that area. The high-tier French destroyers, the Mogador, the Kléber, and to a degree also the Le Fantasque, are definitely more scout cruisers or very, very light cruisers than actual destroyers. And again, the sort of this defining part here is the relative, for a destroyer, relatively low maneuverability. And while I haven't tested them, the high tier, and they're not out yet, that's why I can't really show them, but the high tier Italian destroyers seem to be falling into a similar category. So, what is the difference in terms of role that these ships are playing? Actually, one we forgot. If you look at it right, you could say that the British light cruiser line falls into that as well. So if you look at something like a Minotaur, obviously, but we are at a 6-second turn time in the ship with the legendary module. So you see that this is starting very rapidly to approach the similar maneuverability stats as the extremely large destroyers, destroyer leaders, or scout cruisers. The big difference, obviously, is that this is technically a cruiser designation in-game, whereas the rest of those we've just looked through are destroyers, at least classification-wise. And the main difference here is in the fact that the cruisers can take citadel hits, whereas destroyers cannot. So cruisers have to be a lot more afraid of battleship armor piercing than these things have to be. But with the introduction of the Italian battleships, this is all changing a lot anyway. So back to the role. What role does a scout cruiser play that is different from a, say, gunboat destroyer? It's not extremely different. The main difference, as I've pointed out, is in the maneuverability. A gunboat destroyer is a first-line screen. A gunboat destroyer is a ship that is highly maneuverable, has great firepower in its guns, and is capable of fighting enemy destroyers at close range. Because of the high maneuverability, gunboat destroyer is able to dodge. Gunboat destroyers will fight at long ranges as well, but they sort of, if they are engaging other targets like destroyers, they will usually fight them more at closer ranges. Whereas the scout cruisers will generally be more leaning towards the long range fire, because they are large, they're easier to hit, and they need to engage targets at a distance where they can dodge the incoming fire, because they don't have an awful lot of hit points. And even though they don't have a citadel, like I said, Italian battleships exist and can pretty much one-shot these type of ships if they get into them at close range. Scout cruisers do have torpedoes, and scout cruisers can use those torpedoes to great effect, but they are at their heart gunboats. They oftentimes have more gun turrets than the gunboat destroyer lines, and they are they have a lot of firepower, and to a degree that they're almost in the light cruiser category, but most of them are still classified as destroyers. So, what are your responsibilities then if you're in a scout cruiser? It is somewhat similar to a gunboat destroyer, but you are between first and second line screens. So if we say a second line screen would be a cruiser, their responsibility is to stay behind the destroyers in the screening process and guard the battleships. This is kind of what you're doing as well. So you can look at it as an ultralight cruiser or an extremely large destroyer, depending on your perspective. And you can be more aggressive than on light cruisers because you don't have to be as afraid of battleship shells, but you're not as aggressive and not as close range fighters as gunboat destroyers, because they will outmaneuver you, and dodging torpedoes can be harder at point blank ranges. So you want to take these fights at longer ranges oftentimes, and make sure that you use your guns to effect. Now, talking about the guns, these are obviously light guns. So something like the Japanese gunboats have 100mm guns, which means you're against larger targets, you're mostly reliant on your high explosive shells and setting fires, whereas something like the German scout cruiser line has 150mm guns, which is sort of already light cruiser territory from the caliber. And their armor piercing is quite potent, and you will do most of your damage using the armor piercing shells. You can often even take on actual light cruisers in these things, because you still have a high maneuverability that allows you to dodge shells, which is not something that you normally would do in a regular destroyer. Normally, you would not get yourself into a gunfight with a light cruiser, because that will not end well. So your responsibility still can include capping. But you're sort of a hybrid between a light cruiser, whose main responsibility is second line screen, destroyer deterrence, and defeating enemy destroyers, and supporting the friendly ships. You don't quite have the utility that light cruisers have in terms of AA and similar things, but with some small exceptions, but you're sort of playing in front of the light cruisers. You're still in for cap domination, but you're playing more cautiously, more at range, and you're often kiting away from enemy ships and keeping your distance while unloading your guns at them. So they're mid to long range destroyers that more rarely get into close range fights. All right, let's see an example of that in action. And I will actually be taking out the Gustav Julius Merker, the Tier 8 German scout cruiser. She's got 550mm guns, which is a smaller loadout than what you would see on a light cruiser, but it's still a very, very capable ship in her own right. So let's go. Looking at the enemy team, the ships like the Kagero, the Benson are obvious targets for us because we outgun these by quite a margin. We might be able to take on a Harlem or a Mogami, but we do have to be careful because these are both light cruisers. I'm not sure was the Harlem a light cruiser? I'll have to check, but we definitely have to be more careful. And Vittorio Veneto with semi-armor piercing is extremely dangerous for us. So it is a domination battle. So one of the roles that I described was, yes, you do need to, you're a scout cruiser or destroyer leader. You still need to work on cap control if there are no other ships in the vicinity doing this. So I am still going to head towards A Cup, and I'm just not planning to necessarily fight the enemy ships at point blank range. I do have Mikhail Kutuzov with me here, which is a very, very capable light cruiser. So we will be assisting that ship and making sure that we're scouting, because as an actual light cruiser, they have to be a lot more afraid of battleship guns than we in a scout cruiser or destroyer leader, because we don't have a citadel and are more maneuverable and not as easy to kill. We have spotted one of the enemy ships. That is potentially one of the bot battleships, or it's the Vittorio Veneto, in which case we have a problem. And we already know that one of the destroyers is in B Cup. So this is about as far forward as I want to be, and it is the bot Amagi, and we've also spotted the Kagero. So we don't have utility. So we're not going to necessarily get into a close range fight with the Kagero. We're just looking at where these torpedoes are coming out, and the Kagero has obviously made a severe misplay because he got himself spotted. But there's also a Mogami coming, so we can use the smoke screen and to assist also the Kutuzov and get him into the smoke, and probably don't want to be sitting around in it, but we can get some of our torpedoes out against the Mogami and then open up the distance, because we don't want to fight a Mogami at this range, because it is an actual light cruiser and it severely outguns us. So we do need to play a little bit further away. But we've chased the Kagero away, even though we haven't quite managed to kill him yet. And as you can see, the 150mm guns are doing a lot of damage. And now we can disengage and open up the distance. We've got some torpedo hits on the Mogami, who has not been paying any attention whatsoever. And we'll just... this is a bot. So if you are fighting battleships, and usually you wouldn't be fighting them at extreme close range like this, but bots target by proximity, and the Kutuzov is closer. So we'll just assist the Kutuzov, because bots will use random ammunition, and if that Amagi is using armor piercing, then that Kutuzov is going to be in big problems. But we've dealt with the bot. And now we're going back to our role of cap control. So there's an enemy Benson. Benson, while not is a good target, but the Kagero is coming around again, and once again has made the cardinal error of getting himself spotted. You're a torpedo destroyer. You do not want to be spotted, because if you get spotted, especially with a scout cruiser in range, then this happens. So while the Kagero has managed to take out the Kutuzov, he has also gotten himself spotted in the process, and is now a very dead Kagero, which leaves us with the Benson. The Benson is a maneuverable multi-role ship. He can function as a gunboat, he can function as a torpedo boat. So we do not want to fight the Benson on equal terms. We do not want to fight the Benson at point-blank range. Fortunately, the Benson smokes up, so we drop some torpedoes into the smoke and then open up the distance, because the Benson has the advantage in maneuverability, which means we have to make it so that we can use our gun power without him being able to use that advantage. There's a Vittorio Veneto if you're targeting battleships, bow section or stern section for maximum penetration, and there she goes. So that thing's gone. And the Benson has just learned that smoke screens are torpedo magnets. But yes, the Benson is sitting in the smoke. But now, obviously, at this range, we have a comfortable range where we can engage, where we have, with our relatively low maneuverability, still have a chance to get to dodge torpedoes. So the Benson sitting broadside has probably gotten torpedoes away, and we're now coming under fire by the Mogami, which again means we want to fight that thing at long range. These were the Benson torpedoes that have been anticipated, and like I said, if at long ranges, it's not so difficult to dodge them. And if you're in a fight with something like a light cruiser, you'll want to keep the distance open. You do not want to be close, because they will have trouble actually hitting you at long ranges. And you do have cruiser guns, but you don't have the same amount of gunfire power as you have in a cruiser. So you do want to make sure that you're playing this at range. And once the target gets frustrated, either because he can't see you anymore, because you're in a smoke screen, or because he's been frustrated because he's been firing at you for the last 2 minutes and hasn't been able to actually hit you, then you can turn around and unleash your guns again. But like I said, stay at range for most gunfights, because you don't have the maneuverability to take on gunboat destroyers, and you don't have the survivability or firepower to take on light cruisers at point-blank range. So that's a scout cruiser. Like I said, similar role to a gunboat, but at longer ranges. Your responsibilities still include cap control. Your primary targets are enemy destroyers, but you can also do a lot of damage to other ships with your guns. And capture control is still part of your responsibilities as well. Just make sure you don't get into a close range fight with more nimble destroyers, because you will probably get torpedoed and lose those. So there we go. And the lines, like I said, probably the most obvious one is the German scout cruisers, high-tier Japanese gunboats, Khabarovsk, French destroyers, upper tiers, probably Italian destroyers, upper tiers. And you could argue that the British light cruisers are so light that they're already almost falling into this category as well. That's it for me today. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.